And I was on this quest of finding ancestral roots, and I was looking for a document. And it was a document that was dated December 16th, 1779. It was a Spanish colonial document, and it was a very important document that I learned about. And when Sally located the document over at the Notorial Archives, which is not a part of this collection, but it's a part of the Spanish colonial collection, we sat down and she gave me a glimpse about a part of my family history that I was not familiar with at the time. This document was a slave manumission document of my fourth generation great-grandmother. Her name was Agnes. She was born in French colonial Louisiana about 1758 on the German coast. Agnes, when I first discovered her, she was about 12 or 13 years old, and she was being sold with her mother, Elizabeth, and her two brothers. But in 1779, this document that I located was the manumission document that was granting her her freedom. The document was written in Spanish, and when we translated it, and we got basically a kind of a cursory summary of what was all involved in this particular document, I learned something that myself and my family was not aware of. There was a court case, a battle that took place here in New Orleans, and Agnes was using a law that the Spanish had implemented when they took over. It was called Cortension or Cortension. It was a process of self-purchasing where the individual could go before the Spanish consul and request their freedom. It was a unique time at that period. And what was really interesting to me about this whole story was she had a friend of hers, a very close friend. It was a Frenchman by the name of Mathieu Deveau, alias Platia. He was listed as Platia in the document. Well, I really didn't know about this individual very much about who he was, but what he did was he went before the Spanish consul here in New Orleans, and he petitioned for her freedom as a third party. Well, she was successful in gaining her freedom in December 16, 1779. It turned out this guy, Mathieu Deveau, alias Platia, was my fourth generation great-grandfather, born in the south of France. He was born February 14th, Valentine's Day, in Marseille, France. He helped a woman gain her freedom during a very critical time in this nation's time period, in Louisiana particularly. I was curious to want to know who he was, where he came from. And I started researching his background and how he got to Louisiana. Found out he came over as a sailor. As I mentioned, I'm a retired naval officer, so to be able to connect my ancestry to a person who sailed from Marseille to Louisiana, and he wound up in Louisiana during a time when Bernardo Galvez was the Spanish colonial governor here, wound up serving under the militia in New Orleans, 3rd Company Artillery. Started piecing this all together. It became a very interesting story because I went to Salt Lake City and I was wanting to find out more about Agnes, how she came to be, but also Mathieu Deveau. And when I pieced it all together, the gentleman who actually, saw the document after Sally mentioned that Bernardo Galvez signed the document. I said, wow, this is really interesting. So when I went to Salt Lake City, this gentleman told me, she said, if I could connect my ancestry to a person who served under Bernardo Galvez, at the time was an American Revolutionary War patriot, which a lot of people don't know. Louisiana participated in the American Revolution, and 4 major battles, Natchitoches, Baton Rouge, Mobile, and Pensacola. Major battles that controlled the Gulf of Mexico, the western flank of the Mississippi River, were supplying guns, bullets, beans up to George Washington, doing Valley Forge and everything. He said, if I can connect myself to this guy Galvez, I would be eligible for induction into the National Society Sons of the American Revolution. At that time, I was looking to find out how I could connect Agnes, because I didn't know who this guy Platia was. And when I dug into the history and found out that it was her French consort, I realized that I found my 4th generation grandfather. So when I pieced the information all together in 2010, I became the first African American in the state of Georgia inducted into the National Society of I stand before you today as a living memorial, a testament of what these documents can provide. It provided me a glimpse into my family history that I was not able to understand and comprehend. In 2011, my 82-year-old mother became a member of the New Orleans chapter of the Daughters of America. The significance of these documents, it holds a vast wealth of information that people like myself could really appreciate it. I am deeply indebted with the Louisiana State Museum Society. Greg Lumbuski and his staff have been very instrumental in helping me along because of, again, this process of really understanding how deep my roots reach back into New Orleans history. I shared with Sally earlier today. I saw her. Sally was about to retire from the Notorious Archives the day when I met her. I mean, it was by chance when I located this document. She was the lady that introduced me to Agnes at the time. And when we came back in 2010, there was a PBS program, picked this program up. It's called The History Detectives. I don't know if many of you have seen that. But it's called the Galvez Papers, and I invite you to go and see it. But Sally, Emily Clark, and the gentleman over at the Williams Research Society, I can't remember his name right offhand. But anyways, these individuals helped put the story together because I wanted to share the story to a much broader audience, and I'm just thrilled. But tonight I shared with Sally Reeves that about a month ago I got in the mail a document. It was a 1658 wedding announcement, marriage record. It was my 8th generation grandmother who came from Rouen, France, settled in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. And she's my 8th generation grandmother who happened to be, her name was Anne Lemont, and her husband was Michel Messier. And she is the sister to Charles Lemont. And Charles is the father of Jean-Baptiste Lemont Bienville. And how interesting is that? These documents really open the history. So I stand before you as a living testimony of how, you know, when we open these documents up, we will find that we all might be related sometimes. Thank you very much.
There's something for everybody in the documents. We are going